One of the most important achievements of the European Union is the single currency of certain member nations. The road to the creation of the euro was long and bumpy. Its introduction required the harmonization of the economies of participating member states. To make the changeover from their national currencies as smooth as possible, member states had to establish a system of uniform economic criteria and common institutions. Alexander mfalussy played a major role in this process and was known as the father of the euro. Not only does the single currency have its own story, but so does mfalussy.
He was himself a real European. He was born in Hungary, he fled to Belgium, arrived in Belgium by chance, then moved to Switzerland, worked in Germany, established the euro with other people. He was basically and fundamentally a European because he came from this generation who experienced the war, the Second World War, and he felt that Europe needs to live in peace. So the project of the euro was basically a European project to help Europe to unite.
The first station of mfalussy's years in emigration was the city of Leuven in Belgium, where he attained a degree in economics at the Catholic University. Following 2 further years of study in Oxford, he was employed as an economic advisor by the Banque de Brussels. 10 years on, he became managing director and later chair of the executive board. His exceptional knowledge and expertise became well known at his former university. And a few years later, aside from all his other activities, he also turned to teaching.
First time I heard about Alexandre mfalussy was when my professor of economics, Léon Duprier, at the Catholic University of Leuven in Belgium, told me that the best students he has ever had was Alexandre mfalussy. From this, mistakenly I'm afraid, he drew the conclusion that I, as a Hungarian, must have been also a good economist, and he asked me to be his assistant. And he suggested a topic for my doctorate thesis. He also suggested that I should ask mfalussy to be the director of my thesis. I very much appreciated the opportunity to consult with Professor mfalussy because he gave me most useful advice on the direction on which I should focus my research.
After leaving Banque de Brussels, mfalussy joined the Bank for International Settlements in Basel as an economic advisor. As a testament to his competence, he was later appointed managing director of the institution, known as the Bank of Central Banks.
He was certainly not a dogmatic person. He thought that rules are important, but at the same time, it was also discretion very important. In fact, he wrote an essay on these rules and this versus discretion. And he thought that central banking was as much as an art as a science. And this was a very important feature for someone who was going to lead the BIS.
As head of the BIS and a member of the Delors Committee, from 1988 to 1989, mfalussy participated in devising the implementation plan of the European Monetary Union. From 1994 to mid-1997, as president of the European Monetary Institute, the forerunner of today's European Central Bank, he was responsible for preparing the introduction of the euro.
His contribution was fundamental to prepare a smooth transition from national currencies to the euro. Alexandre mfalussy conducted all the meetings, organized the process which contributed to this smooth transition. It was his personality, a person combining sharp intellect, knowledge of financial markets, of central banking, and politeness to create an atmosphere which was very conducive to a kind of European orientation.
As the president of the European Monetary Institute, he made the euro possible. Because the first years before the creation of the euro, between the Maastricht Treaty and the introduction of the euro in 1999, have been absolutely critical for the creation of the European currency, and Alexandre played a major role during this period. So I think we can consider him as the father of the euro.
His task, however, didn't end with the introduction of the euro. As a member of the Euro 50 group, he kept a close eye on the fate of the single currency and the monetary union.
It was more than 10 years before the euro crisis, more than 10 years. And at that time, I visited a few people, and the first one I visited was Alexandre mfalussy. And I told Alexandre, don't you think that everybody thinks that it is the end of the story? We have created the European currency, but we know, because we are very, very aware of what we have been doing, that there are still a lot of problems ahead. And we should create a watch group. I do think that without Alexandre, the Euro 50 group would not have existed, obviously, and would not be what it is today.
Apart from the introduction of the single currency, mfalussy can also be credited with another significant success. In the early 1980s, as Deputy General Manager of the BIS, he saved his homeland, Hungary, from potential financial collapse.
Alexander mfalussy was closely involved in the discussions between the Hungarian Central Bank and the BIS when they were negotiating some kind of credit facilities at the beginning of the debt crisis of the 80s. A particularly important year was 1981, when Alexander mfalussy was appointed Assistant General Manager, and it was in this capacity that he was able to intervene in these negotiations. In April, May and October, the BIS granted some credit facilities to the Central Bank of Hungary, which is a temporary bridge loan supported and backstopped by the central banks, was a kind of model, a kind of template that was going to be used in all the Latin American crisis that was going to come in a few years.
And even later on, he still kept an eye on Hungary.
We had a closer cooperation when I returned to Hungary in April 1990. He was first advisor to the Antal government and later to the Orbán government, and I was Deputy Governor of the National Bank of Hungary. We often consulted on various issues, and we very much appreciated his insights. He had a very innovative mind, practical, pragmatical approach to the issues of the day, and had a very logical mind, explaining his argument in a very clear, understandable way.
Alexander mfalussy's achievements were accompanied by distinctions and commissions. These include a Belgian noble title of Baron, Chair of the Committee of Wise Men on the Regulation of European Securities Markets, Commander in France's Legion of Honor, Order of Merit of the Federal Republic of Germany, Grand Officer of the Order of Leopold, the Popovich Award, the Grand Cross of the Order of Merit of the Republic of Hungary, and external member of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences.
He was one of the most impressive personalities in central banking I've ever met. He was not only a master of theory, but also of practice in financial markets. This again led a deep influence on my thinking.
Alexandre was so successful because he used to listen, to ask for questions and to listen to the people. He was a very open mind.
mfalussy was a convinced humanist and really a true European and citizen of the world. I think really he was a wise man, and I think that requires experience, and he had experience in the banking as a private banker, but also in the public sector. He has the tremendous intellectual capacity. He was an extremely good economist, and he had a very wide perspective, a systemic perspective, as we call it today. But also he was able to explain very complex things in very simple words.
Aside from his work, he also had time for his wife and 4 children.
In a way, he was a very busy father by his profession, but he was also very present in following us as young children. So for the most important question, he was always there. The dinner was a very important part of our family life because this is where we were sharing everything. What happened to us at school and what happened to them, to my mother or to my father at work. I had economic lessons every day at dinner. When he was speaking about his work, I was taking lessons from a special teacher.
Mfalussy was a humble man for whom awards, titles and positions were never important. Throughout his entire life, he worked towards a far more elevated goal.
When we made the interviews for the book a few years ago, the last question was about that. Why are you, what was behind your work? And he said Europe.